Welcome to the most complete and most up-to-date guide for World of Warcraft on the internet. Whether you're brand new or you're returning after a break, this guide will teach you everything you need to know to enjoy World of Warcraft without stress or frustration. I've put timestamps in the description so you can come back to any topic you need in the future. Let's dive in. All right, so the first thing that you're going to have to do when you log into World of Warcraft is you're going to have to choose what realm you play on. Now, this choice doesn't matter nearly as much as it used to. It used to determine who you could and could not play with. That's no longer the case. You can play with someone on Bleeding Hollow if you're on Mal'Ganis. This choice doesn't matter nearly as much as it used to, but feel free to try to end up on the same server as your friends. If you don't, it's not a big deal anymore. You can still do everything with them. Now, once you've chosen the server that you're going to play on, or the realm as it calls it, it's going to be time to create a character, and you're going to have a screen kind of like this once you start creating characters, and you'll start seeing them sit around the fire. Your favorites are going to be the ones that are showing up here sitting around the fire, but that doesn't mean that the rest of these characters down here are not also in your warband. Warband is a brand new system that they've added to the game that is absolutely phenomenal. It fixed a lot of my gripes with World of Warcraft, so I absolutely love it, and we're going to go into much more detail on it later, but just know that this full list is your warband. It's not just the one sitting around the fire. All of your characters that you make are in your warband. Just know that. And there's going to be benefits to this. For example, every max level character that you have is going to make the character that you're leveling level up a little bit faster. So if you've got 5 max level characters, your non-max level characters are going to level way faster than if you only had 1 max level character. It's a really nice system to make it easier and easier and easier to level alts the more max level characters that you have. They've also added a warband bank that allows you to transfer items between these characters and currencies. And when items drop in this game, now, instead of just being soulbound, which means the character that picks it up has to use it, there's also these things called warbound, which are items that when you pick them up, you can pass them off to any of your characters on this list, which has made this game 1,000 times more alt-friendly. It's a great new system. So you'll see warbound items. That just means that you can put it into your war bank and hand it off to your alts. If your warrior gets a cloth item that it can't wear, you can hand it off to your mage, for example. This didn't used to be a thing. This is a phenomenal new addition to the game, and we're going to dive into it in much more detail later. But first, let's talk about the next decision you have to make, which is you have to create a character. So you're going to be hitting the create character button. You're going to be given an option like this. And sometimes if there's an event going on, you'll see an event pop up saying, do you want to make a character in this event? Or do you just want to make a standard World of Warcraft character? We're going to go with standard. And here you're going to be presented with 2 really important choices. You're going to have to choose your race, and you're going to have to choose your class. So on the left side, we've got the alliance races, and on the right side, we've got the horde races. And this used to be a really important decision. Do you go alliance or do you go horde? Now, this game is amazing, but what about when you need a change of pace? That's where World of Warships Legends comes in. It's epic, it's free, and I guarantee it will blow you away. In World of Warships Legends, you'll find loads of historically accurate ships to earn and use strategically on the battlefield. I mean, Battle Water? This isn't a fast-paced FPS game where it all comes down to who gets the crosshair on the enemy first. This is a much more methodical and deliberate combat style where the tactics you choose will decide the victor. You can jump straight into the action and enjoy 9v9 battles, or join a 3-man team against 3 other teams. Play the game in the comfort of your own home on your Xbox or PlayStation, or take it on the road and play it on mobile when life drags you out of the house. Choose the nation you want to command and control your fleet of destroyers, cruisers, and aircraft carriers, with new ships to choose from being added to the game every 5 weeks. It's easy to learn, and over 8 million players have jumped in for free. So join them using the link in the description below. And best of all, if you join right now, they're celebrating their 5th anniversary, so you can get free rewards using this code. Explore the festive ancient Greece-styled events, including Treasure Hunt Web and the new crafting station, and take advantage of the introduction of the brand new US hybrid battleship line. So what are you waiting for? Use the link in the description to join everyone and experience what it's like to command a naval fleet. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the video. So on the left side, we've got the alliance races, and on the right side, we've got the horde races. And this used to be a really important decision. Do you go alliance or do you go horde? Just like servers used to be a really important decision, but they're not anymore. And the same is true here. Which faction you choose doesn't really matter anymore. When you're playing the game, alliance can now party with horde players when they're doing a dungeon or a raid, or even in PvP. You can basically do everything with everyone in the game. The faction choice is almost purely cosmetic. Now, you cannot go to OGRIMMAR, which is going to be where a lot of Horde players are just hanging out. You're not going to be going over there and hanging out on your Alliance characters yet, but maybe someday. So for now, if you want to try to end up on a Horde character when your friends are on Horde, it might make things a little bit easier. It might make it a little easier to hang out or to meet up, but just know that if you happen to be on a different Alliance than someone, you can still raid with them, you can still do dungeons with them, you can still quest with them, and you can still PvP with them. So once you've chosen which faction you want to be on, you're going to have to choose what class you want to play, right? This is a really important choice for people. And what class you play is kind of going to determine what race you can choose from, because you'll notice up here, humans can be warriors, hunters, mages, but they can't be druids, shaman, demon hunters, or evokers, right? Those are grayed out when we choose human. But if we choose night elf, now the night elf can be druid, but they can't be paladin, right? So your race kind of limits what class you can play. So you're going to probably want to work backwards from the class that you want to play, and then you're going to want to pick from one of the races that is available when you choose that class. Now you're going to notice that there's two columns of races here. The left column are the races that you're going to have access to, assuming that you own the content that they were released into. And then the inner row here is going to be unlockable races. And if you hover over them, it tells you to unlock this race, reach level 40, then visit the Stormwind Embassy to recruit this allied race. This used to be a lot of work to unlock these races, but they've really trimmed it down and made it something that takes a lot less time. So if you do want to play one of these races, it's not too difficult to unlock them. Same thing over here on the Horde side, you've got these unlockable races that you can have access to. Now, World of Warcraft is a Trinity-based game. You've got tanks, healers, and DPS. Except in World of Warcraft, we're going to go ahead and add one to that. So you've got tanks, healers, and then you have melee damage dealers and ranged damage dealers. So we end up with 4 roles in World of Warcraft. And so all of these classes are going to fit into as few as one of those roles, and one of them fits into all 4. So let's talk about that. The warrior is going to be able to tank or do melee damage. The warrior can dual wield 2-handed weapons, they can dual wield 1-handed weapons, or they can run a 1-hander and a shield, right? For example, the warrior is going to be able to be a tank or a melee damage dealer. The hunter is going to be able to do ranged damage or melee damage. The mage is going to be able to do ranged damage only, and the rogue is going to be able to do melee damage only. The priest is going to be able to heal or do ranged damage. The warlock is going to be able to do ranged damage only. The paladin is going to be able to tank, heal, or do melee damage. So they can do 3 roles. And then the druid is going to be able to tank, heal, range damage, or melee damage, right? The druid can do all 4. The shaman is going to be able to do healing, range damage, or melee damage. The monk is going to be able to tank, heal, or do melee damage. The demon hunter can tank and do melee damage. The death knight can also tank or do melee damage. And then the evoker can heal or do range damage. It's worth noting that the evoker can only be played by the Dragthyr right now. So you'll notice if you choose any other race, you cannot play Evoker, but as a Dragthyr, you can. But at the time of this recording, Evoker can only be played by a Dragthyr. All of the classes can do all of the content in the game. It doesn't matter which one you choose. The most important thing to decide is what role do you want to fulfill? Do you want to be a tank? Do you want to be the healer? Do you want to be the damage dealer? Do you want to be ranged DPS? Do you want to be melee DPS, right? You want to decide that and then pick one of the classes that can fulfill that role, because the role that you choose to fill is going to have the largest impact on the gameplay style that you experience. Once you've chosen what race and class you want to play, then you go ahead and say customize. The first thing you'll be able to choose is your name. So if I wanted to go with LUCKYGHOST, it's going to tell me that, nope, there's an X that pops up. This is not available. So you're going to need to keep changing your name until a green check mark appears. Druid, we'll do a play on Druid here. There, that's available. And the rest of these choices are all cosmetic, so there's really no right or wrong choice. After you've chosen what your character looks like, you'll be given these options. You can go to Exile's Reach, which is the new leveling 1 to 10 experience, or you can go to the classic starting experience, which would be Red Cloud Mesa for this character. If you're trying to get to the end game, this one's definitely going to be faster for you. If you just want to experience World of Warcraft the way it used to be, then go ahead and go with Red Cloud Mesa. For this guide, we're going to touch on Exile's Reach, so we'll click Finish. We've got our level 1 druid, and we click Enter World. This will start you out on a ship. I'm not going to go through all of this, but just follow the exclamation points. Anytime you see one of these, go do it. When you see a question mark, that means you can turn in the quest that you've completed, and this is all going to be pretty straightforward for you from here. So now let's talk about what you do right after you finish Exile's Reach, because that's the most confusing thing for new players. I think you go through this linear story that is Exile's Reach, and at about level 10 or 11, you finish that, and you're dumped into the game, and you have no idea where to go next. So what you're going to do is you're going to open up your map now, and this is brand new. After you finish that, you'll see this exclamation point nearby somewhere, and it says the Dragon Isles await. And this is where you're going to go next. So You're going to head over to that NPC for the Horde. It is this one right here. You're going to accept it and then talk to him again, complete the quest. And you'll keep on talking to him until you get a cutscene, and after that cutscene, complete it. So you'll talk to both of the NPCs whose exclamation points pop up right after that, and you're going to pick up their artisans, and then it's going to send you to go talk to a few NPCs and then meet them at the Zeppelin to fly over to the Dragon Isles. Go find the recruits first. You go through the portal that pops up next to them, and you'll see some NPCs glowing yellow like this. Go ahead and talk to those ones. If you open up your map, you can see them on your mini map as well. So once you've talked to all 3 of the glowing people down at the bottom, then you're going to go ahead and climb the Zeppelin Tower. So climb to the top of your Zeppelin Tower. If you're Alliance, it's the same thing. It just looks slightly different. Same process. And at the top, you're going to talk to the NPC here, turn in both quests. Talk to Khadgar when he shows up. He'll show you a nice cutscene. Then talk to all of the NPCs here. You got to turn the quest in, accept the new quest, and it's going to say take the portal or the Zeppelin to the Dragon Isles. So you could have got on the Zeppelin. It's flying away now. We're going to just take the portal. It's faster, so I take the portal if I was you. But if you've never taken a Zeppelin, go for it. And then bam, you are now in the Dragon Isles, and you can just follow this quest. This is a much, much better new player experience than we used to have in WoW. You go straight from Exile's Reach. You talk to a few NPCs. They summon you here to the Dragon Isles. And the best part about getting dumped right into Dragon Isles at this point in your journey is that you'll be able to unlock dragon riding in here, which is going to unlock skyrидing in the rest of the game. So you'll be able to get a flying mount in no time, and just as importantly, you'll be unlocking dragon riding with that and getting a dragon mount. So this is an awesome way to start the game. So from here, like I said, just follow the quests. You are on Dragon Isles and you're going to play through this. And when you finish this, you'll get sent to the War Within expansion. Dragon Isles is an absolutely amazing expansion. So have fun leveling up through this one. All right, now let's talk about another huge part of this game that can be a little bit overwhelming when you're brand new, and that's the user interface. There's a lot of information on screen, and when you start the game, it's going to look a little bit like this. You're going to have your chat box in the bottom left, your character frame right here, which is going to tell you your health, your mana, and then possibly some other information below that. And then you've got your skill bar. You're going to start with 1, and most likely you'll have more than that as you play the game. And that's one of the key areas of being overwhelmed for new players, is you end up having a lot of skills, or you watch someone else play and it looks like they've got a lot of skills, but don't worry, we're going to make that real easy for you to navigate. Then in the bottom right here, you've got your bags where all the items you're picking up are going, and you've got each individual menu system that we'll dive into momentarily. Then you've got all of the quests that you're working on. You can minimize these if you don't want to see them. Sometimes it'll be a really long list if you've accepted a lot of quests, and you might just want it off of your screen while you're doing them so that it's not taking up the space, and you can do that and make it look nice and neat. And then above that, you've got your mini map, and right here you've got buffs that are on your character. If it's a buff that's been placed on you by you or somebody else, you can go ahead and right click it and that'll remove it, just in case you have some kind of effect on your character that you don't want there anymore. Just know that you can get rid of them by right clicking on them. But most of the time when you have a positive buff, you're not going to want to remove it. All right, now I've turned off my add-ons again just to make sure that my UI looks the same as yours might look as a new or returning player. And we're going to talk about a really important UI feature, and that is right clicking on your portrait or somebody else's portrait. And this is going to give you a lot of options. So if you right click on your portrait, you're going to be able to put an icon over your head, or if it was somebody else's, this makes it real easy if you know, hey, I need to be standing next to this person in a dungeon, or I need to make sure I'm not standing next to this person, or, you know, if you have a hard time keeping track of the tank, so you're not standing behind them, you know, catching AoE. Or sometimes people will put these down in raids and say, hey, when the boss does this, run over to the skull, or stay away from the skull, you die if you go in that area. Another thing you can do in here is change your loot specialization. This is going to decide like what type of loot you're getting while you're running through the dungeon. So if you're a mage, you have 3 different specs that you could be trying to get loot for. And so what you can do is you can tell the game, hey, ignore what specialization I'm playing, give me the drops that fall into a specific specialization. And that way, if you were looking to change specs, or if you were just temporarily playing a spec that wasn't your main, you could still be collecting mostly gear that is for your main spec. The game will try to give you gear that is for the spec that you tell it here. Also in here, if you right click on your portrait, you can change dungeon difficulty. And if you're the leader, this is going to affect the dungeon difficulty for the entire group. And same Same goes for the raid difficulty. And then finally, you can reset all instances. If you go into a dungeon instance, but it's not fully cleared, it's a mess, right? And you're not going to clear it, but you need to go back in again, you can reset your dungeon instances if you need to. Here, you can also go to edit mode again. You can do this simply by pressing escape and going to edit mode as well. And then finally, you've got voice chat. If you use the voice chat in this game, you can change your volume and the volume that you're hearing from other people. Now, if you run up to somebody else and click on them, you can right click on their portrait and you can do things like inspect, and we could peek at their gear here and see, oh wow, man, this person is decked out. They've got some pretty decent gear here. So they've got some nice 502 gloves. Great, right? And you could check someone's gear, whether it's a friend or someone that you are considering adding to your group for a certain piece of content, and just check and make sure that they've got what they need for that content. They're not trying to pull one over on you. You could also compare achievements. If it's you and a friend or something, you want to see who has what done, and maybe you both are missing certain things and you want to try to go do things that you both need done. That's an easy way to do that. You could choose to duel them or pet battle them. We talked about pet battles a little bit earlier. And if you run into an especially spicy player, you can report them, or if you want, you can copy their character name so that you can whisper them or add them as a friend or whatever. Oh, and I just remembered one last thing that you're going to do a lot in this game is you'll right click on your portrait to leave dungeons and to leave raids. So at the very end of a dungeon, you'll be able to right click on your portrait and say leave raid group or leave dungeon group, and it's going to eject you from that instance. And sometimes this is the only way out of those places, the only reasonable way out of those places. So this is something you're absolutely going to need to be aware of and to use. If everybody disappears and you don't know where they went, it's likely that's what they did. I'm not actually in a dungeon right now, so you can't see that option here. So first, let's talk about some settings that you should absolutely change when you dive into this game. One of which is when we talked about the bag, you can see when I click the bag here, it opens one bag, and that's kind of useless, right? And when we open all the bags, they're broken down. It's kind of a mess. Sorting your bags this way is not going to be super clean. So one of the things you can do is you can click on your bag right here, and you can click the bag here, and then you say convert to combined bag. And now you've got one big bag with a reagent bag next to it once you get one of those. This is really nice. Alternatively, you can come into options, and this got this nice search bar at the top, and you can say bag, and you can say combined bags, and you can check this. Anytime there's a setting you want to change, the search bar at the top here is really handy. So let's go through some other things that you should absolutely change, starting with some key bindings. So for movement keys, by default, for whatever reason, this game has A and D instead of strafing like any sane human being would do. A and D turn your character, and it doesn't turn it very well. It's a wide turn, so it's not practical to use in content, because if something lands underneath you, an enemy area of effect ability, for an example, you know, they put a bunch of fire under you, it's going to take forever to turn and run. Whereas if you just turn the way we do by holding right click, you hold your right click and you turn, and you'll notice your character turns when you do that. You hold left click and turn, and your character doesn't turn. So the use of this is when you're on a mount, for example, you can be running and you can just turn by holding the right click, or you can see what's going on behind you by using left click. This allows you to keep running in a direction, either away from mobs or towards friends or whatever you have, and still look around without, you know, interrupting your character's path of movement. So that's the difference between right clicking and moving your mouse and left clicking and moving your mouse. And because we turn by holding down right click, what we can do is, and what most veteran players do, is you come in here, you go to your key bindings, and you bind strafe left to A and strafe right to D. And this will feel like any other game you may have played on PC, any first-person shooter, any action RPG or something like that, any other MMO. This is generally how the controls are going to work. Another thing worth noting is going to be the auto run feature. You can choose where you want it to be. I have it on middle mouse button down, so I just press that middle mouse button, the scroll wheel. In other words, I press it down rather than rolling it, and my character auto runs. It's really handy. You're going to be using it a lot in this game. And then just take note of toggling run and walk just in case you accidentally hit it. If you do bump it and your character's stuck walking for some reason, you can come in here and look at how to turn it off so that your character starts running again. But the most important key bindings are going to be your action bars. This is one of the places where in a game that has 20 skills for your character and you only have 5 fingers on each hand, you start to wonder how you're going to be able to reach them all. And so I'll show you my recommended way of handling this if you're a new player. So you're going to start with a bar that looks like this. And if we zoom in on it here, you can see that it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 dash equal sign. Most people cannot comfortably use WASD to move and then still reach for 7 and beyond, right? That's 6. You know, if you've got big hands, you can hit 6, but 7, 8, 9, 0, right? You're not going to be able to reach those while running around, evading an enemy hit. So what I recommend doing is go to your options, go to action bars, turn on action bar 2 if it's not already on, and maybe even get action bar 3, just have them ready to go. And then what you can do is you can come in here, press edit mode, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on action bar 1 down here, and I'm going to say hide button art. I'm going to move it to the top. There we go. And then I'm going to say that this is only going to have 6 buttons for now. And I'm going to hide bar scrolling here. So now it's got 6 buttons. I'm going to go to action bar 2, and I'm going to make this 6 buttons, right? 6 icons. On action bar 3, I'm going to do the same. Now what we have on screen is 18 buttons. But first, what we've got to do is go to options, go to key bindings, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for that. But then we've got action bar 1's already set up, right? They've already bound it to things. We're going to come to action bar 2, and we're going to make these shift 1, shift 2, shift 3, shift 4, shift 5, and shift 6. Then action bar 3, control 1, control 2, control 3, control 4, control 5, control 6. Close. Okay, now you've got 18 buttons that your left hand can use. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, shift 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's nice and easy. You know, if it's the top row, you're just hitting the number. If it's the middle row, you're hitting shift and then the number. And if it's the bottom row, you hit control and then the number. So this is one easy way. It's just an example on how to set it up. And hopefully this makes this a little more digestible to you. You can always come into edit mode if you need more buttons, and you can click on these frames. Let's say you wanted to add a button to each row because you had more than you needed. So you come in here, change it to 7. There you go. 7's kind of hard to reach. So what I would do is for the key bindings for this, I would make 7 into R. So control R, shift R, and R. There. Now, R is one of my abilities, and you can keep doing that. If you wanted to use Q or W, you could put those on each one of these. And you can see how this would easily scale from giving you 18 buttons to choose from to quickly giving you 21 or 24 and so on. This is just one way to handle that. I play with an MMO mouse that has 12 buttons on my thumb. So I've got buttons 1 through 12 here, shift 1 through 12 here, and control 1 through 12 here. And I know if it's a skill in this section, I just hit the number. If it's a skill in the middle section, I hit shift and the number. And if it's a skill over here, I hit control and then the number, right? And sometimes it's a skill, sometimes it's something like your mount. You're going to be getting off and on your mount all the time. And so you're going to want to open up your mount menu, shift P, mounts, and you're just going to want to drag a mount on here. And that way you can hit that button and jump on your mount anytime that you want to. My screen all of a sudden looks different because I turned on my add-ons to quickly show you my UI that I'm playing with. And don't worry, I'm going to talk about add-ons, how to install them, and which ones I recommend in a little bit. But as you can see, in just a couple of minutes, we set up our UI to be something that is a lot more usable and a lot more easy to discern what buttons you need to press to get to a certain ability really quickly at a glance. Another setting that I would definitely change if you're a new player is I would enable action targeting. This option is going to make this feel more like an action MMO. So all you have to do is look at an enemy and the game will automatically target them and your skills will hit the enemy that you're looking at. This works really well 99% of the time. Later on in more advanced play, when you're pushing mythic keys and things like that, you are going to want to manually target certain enemies so that you can do your kicks, you can interrupt them. Kicking and interrupting enemies is going to be something that's really important down the road, but you don't really need to worry about it until you're max level and you've made the decision to push into difficult content. Until then, this setting just makes the game feel really smooth, makes it real easy to run up to things and attack them without having to tab target them or manually click on them with your mouse. Now let's dive into all the menus here. So first up, we've got character info. You can get to this by pressing C on your keyboard or by clicking the button down here if you're not using any add-ons that hide this menu system. This screen has a lot of really important information for a new player to understand. First, you've got all your gear. So each one of these is a piece of gear that my character's wearing. In this game, you're going to be wearing a helmet, a necklace, shoulder armor, a cloak on your back, your body piece. This is your chest usually, but sometimes it's a robe that goes all the way down to your feet. That doesn't mean that you won't also still be wearing pants. Everybody's still going to wear pants.
Maybe I should get some pants on.
You can have a shirt, but this is cosmetic. You can have a guild tabard. This can affect your reputation gains for certain guilds in the game, either player guilds or NPC guilds. We have wrist armor. You are going to be wearing gloves, a belt, pants, as we mentioned, shoes, and then you're going to wear 2 rings and 2 trinkets. So you've got a lot of different pieces of gear to wear. Then you've got, of course, your weapons. And your weapons might wear 1 2-hand weapon, or you might wear 2 1-hand weapons, or a wand and an offhand like a sword, or maybe even a 1-hand weapon like a sword, and then a shield, depending on your class. The class you are will determine what weapons you can and cannot equip. And similarly, the class you are will determine if you're wearing cloth armor, chain armor, plate armor, or leather armor. Each of those are determined by the class that you choose. Each class has a specific set of armor that they're going to perform best in. To find out what armor your class wears, just press P to open your passives menu, then type in armor and search. And right here it says armor skills passive, and it says mages can wear cloth armor. Starting at 27, you receive a 5% increase to your intellect for wearing cloth. Now, some classes are going to be able to wear more than one type of armor, but they're going to get a buff there, that second line that says starting at this level, you're going to get a % increase to your stat for wearing leather, plate, cloth. And that's the armor you should be wearing. Whichever one it says you get a % increase to your stat, that's the one you want to be wearing, even though your class might be able to wear another type of armor as well. Now back to our character screen, we've got the all important character's item level right here. It says item level. This character's item level is 480 because if we hover over this piece of gear, it says item level 480. And so this is the average of all of your item levels. Right now, I'm wearing almost exclusively 480 gear. I do have one piece here that's 493. Add it all up, divide it, and it averages out to 480. If we take a piece of gear off, now that slot counts for 0, and you see my average drops down to 450. I'll put those pants on. So we've got an average of 480 gear score. And no, your shirt and your tabard do not count towards your gear score, so you don't have to worry about those too. The nice thing about item level is it makes it real easy to determine if a piece of gear is better for you or not. So if you have 2 pairs of gloves in your inventory, they're over here, and you're not sure, is it better than what I'm wearing or not? Well, the easy answer is the item level higher? Then yes, it's better than what you're wearing. This is going to be true 99.9% of the time, and it's going to be true basically 100% of the time when you're leveling up your character to max level. The only time it's not going to be true is once you reach max level, you might get an item that's slightly higher item level, but the stats on that item aren't quite as good. So until you get to max level, just equip the item that has the higher item level and keep moving forward. This makes it real easy to progress stress-free when you're leveling up your characters. Now below that, we've got our attributes. You've got your main stat. On the mage, that's intellect. On the warrior, for example, it would be strength. So it's saying intellect, stamina, armor. And then below that, we've got enhancements. These are our secondary stats: critical strike, haste, mastery, versatility. So let's talk about what each of these does. If we hover over this, intellect says that it's going to increase the magnitude of our spells. So we're going to increase our spell damage. Great. Stamina is going to increase our health. So if you need more health points, if you're feeling too squishy, stamina is the stat for you. Then you've got armor. Armor is going to provide physical damage reduction. Below that, we've got enhancements. Critical strike is going to determine the chance for extra effectiveness on your attacks or your heals. Haste is going to increase your attack speed and spell casting speed. Mastery is going to be different for each spec. So if we look at this, our mastery is savant on this character. It's going to increase our mana regeneration rate and our maximum mana by blank. And then your mastery stat is going to depend on the class and the spec that you choose. So if we go to our skills again, we just type mastery, it's going to say mastery savant. And this is what you would get for your mastery stat. Improving this stat is going to increase our mana regeneration and max mana. It's going to improve the amount of damage our arcane charges increase our damage by, and it's going to increase all other arcane damage. If we had chosen a different mastery, we might get frozen orb damage. And if we were curious what other specs masteries might provide, we could hover over them here and see what the mastery stat would do for the other specs as well. And then finally, versatility. This is going to increase the damage and healing done and decrease our damage taken. So generally is just an all around good for your offense and good for your defense stat. You get a little more verse, your character's doing a little more damage and is a little tankier as well. Depending on your build, the build that you play is going to determine how important each of these stats are. Some stats like critical strike are just not very important on some builds, right? Because their dots don't crit. And some builds just really don't benefit a lot from their mastery stat, while others really do. And some really want haste, right? So the build that you choose to make is going to determine which of these these stats are important to you. And as always, as a new player, there's no harm in following a build guide if you're not sure what to do. There's a lot of great resources for build guides in WoW. Wowhead is just one of them, and it's a great one if you want to head over to that site, look up a build, and it'll say that intellect is the most important, followed by haste, followed by mastery. It would tell you the order of importance of each of these stats that you're looking for on your gear. Above all of this, you've got your character stats, right? We can choose to see our titles that we've unlocked. And then right here, we've got an equipment manager. If you want to have multiple different loadouts for your character, this isn't something you're going to need to worry about anytime soon though. But down the road, if you end up having a loadout for dungeons, a loadout for PvP, a loadout for raids, you might put those different sets in here. Now, at the bottom, we've got other tabs. You've got reputation. Reputation is so much better now. They just improved the rep grind so much in the War Within. So it used to be you would have to do these rep grinds on each character. So you did half of the rep grind on one character. You had to start all over again and do that rep grind on the new character that you made. Now, rep grinds are going to be account wide with War Within. When War Within launches, some of them are going to be account wide, and then they're going to work on making all of them account wide as time passes. They haven't gotten to all of these yet, but they're working on it. But to start, some of the newer ones are going to be account wide progression. So that's huge. That's going to make getting these rep grinds done so much easier. But what is the point of rep grinds? Well, in the past, rep grinds have unlocked races for you to play as. They've unlocked cosmetics, currencies, and all sorts of rewards. They can unlock quests. Really, rep grinds can have just about anything tucked behind them, and it's the rewards at the end of those things that end up making them really worth doing. So right now, you can see when I click on Dragonflight, it says this is a warband faction. Reputation gained with this faction is shared across all of your characters. In Legion, it doesn't say that yet, but don't worry, they're working on it. Then the next tab we've got is currencies. This is sorted by expansion. So War Within currencies, Dragonflight currencies, Dungeon and Raid currencies, miscellaneous, and so on. Then down here, you've got your legacy expansions, Legion, Warlords of Draenor, etc. So if you're ever curious how much of a currency you have, you can just open up your character screen, click currency, and you'll see it in there. If you're curious how much gold you have, just open up your bags, and it's right here at the bottom of your bag. Gold, silver, copper. Right there. As you leveled up, it used to be really important to save your gold, but that's not the case anymore. Your mounts are handed to you for free as you're leveling up. So gold isn't really going to be something that you're struggling with as you're playing the game early on. The next tab that we have here is our professions. You can select up to 2 primary professions. Some are gathering, some are crafting. So right now I have alchemy and herbalism. So I'd be able to craft things and I'd be able to gather things to craft, right? So I've got the herbalism to gather the herbs, and then I've got alchemy to craft things with the herbs that I've gathered. As a new player, I recommend doing 2 gathering professions like herbalism and mining. And this way, as you're out playing the game, you'll see herbs on the ground, you can gather them. You see an ore node, you can gather it, and then you'll slowly accumulate this stuff and you can just sell it on the auction house for free money. And this is going to be a lot easier than trying to keep up with experienced crafters. If you're a brand new player, it can be kind of difficult to make money as a crafter because the experienced players are going to be way ahead of you. They're going to be crafting tons of the things that are profitable, driving the prices on those things down. So until you're experienced, it can be easier just to gather these materials as you're playing through the rest of the game and passively make money off of them. And then use that to buy whatever you need when you need it. Next up, we have talents and spellbook here. So this is one section that's got 3 different tabs. And at first, all you're going to have access to is your spellbook and whatever spells that you have unlocked so far, as well as the passives that you've unlocked. Then when you hit level 10, you're going to unlock your talents and your specializations. Your specialization is going to determine what version of your class you're playing. On the mage, the specialization is going to determine what type of damage dealer we are. Are we an arcane mage firing arcane magic? Are we a fire mage firing fire? Or are we a frost mage firing frost abilities? On classes that can fulfill more than one role, your specialization is what determines what role you're playing. Now, when we're looking at a class that has more than one role they can play, like damage dealer and tank, if we look at the specialization options, we could be arms, fury, protection on the warrior. And it says that arms and fury would be damage dealers, but protection is a tank. So your specialization is how you choose what role you're going to fill on the classes that can fill more than one role. The mage, it's always going to be damage. But warrior, it could be tank or damage. It's up to you. And you can switch anytime you want to. You can play half the game as a fury warrior, and then later on you can decide, hey, I want a tank now, and you can switch over to tank spec. Now, optimal tank gear is going to be slightly different than optimal fury warrior gear. But for basic dungeons and for low level raiding, you can get by mostly wearing Fury gear on your protection warrior and vice versa. You're just going to need to make sure that you have the right weapons equipped. Your prot warrior is going to want to have a one hand and a shield, where your Fury warrior would be dual wielding two one-handers or two two-handers. Then your arms warrior would be using one two-hander. So your specialization can determine your role, it can determine the weapons you use, and it can totally change the playstyle of your character. The specialization system is a really cool facet of WoW. Now, the specialization you choose is going to affect the talents that you have access to. So because I am arcane spec, when we go to my talent tree, I've got my mage talents. This is just all mages get this. And then on the other side, I've got my arcane talents that I have access to. So there's two quick things to say about your talents. One, don't stress. If this is looking overwhelming and you're like, how am I possibly going to know which thing to choose as a new player? That's fair. You probably don't know what to choose. You can read them and, you know, if it sounds like two things would work together, they probably do. But if you don't want that headache, you can just go to a website like Wowhead, just search for Arcane Mage build if you're an Arcane Mage. So it says Arcane Mage DPS Guide War Within. And then you just go down here, you scroll down and you click Copy Talents. Copy, go back here, go to Import, paste that, give it a name. You can say Wowhead Arcane DPS, right? So you know where you got it. Boom. And now your character is going to automatically equip all of those talents while you're playing the game. And you don't have to worry about if you pick the right ones or not. But what you are going to want to do after you do something like this is you've just unlocked a lot of passives, but also some abilities. So make sure that you have all of the abilities that you're going to be using on your bar so that you can use them. If you've unlocked an ability in your talent tree, but you forget to put it on your bar and you're not using it, that could be a really big DPS loss for your character. The easiest way to tell is the shape. If it's square, you need to slot it on your bar somewhere. If it's a circle, it's a passive. Now, something new that's been added with War Within is the hero talents, which are going to unlock at level 71. So after your first level in the War Within expansion, you'll unlock this system and it's going to be a further subdivision of your class and more customization for you to choose from. And once again, you don't have to worry about that until you hit 71, but once you do, it's there and you should engage with it to make sure that you are making your character even stronger still. In the bottom right of your talents page, you're going to notice that you've got some extra options. You can toggle this on and off. This is war mode. When it's off, it's not glowing. When it's on, it's glowing. And this turns on PvP. So what you do is you have to come back to town to turn this on or off. And then when you leave town and you go out into the wild, if you have PvP on, other people that have PvP on can attack you. People that don't have PvP on cannot. And vice versa. If you have it on, you can attack other people that have war mode on. And so then down here, you can choose a few different talents to slot for PvP. So you can say, I want to be the Master of Escape, I want to be Temporal Shield, and I want Arcanosphere, right? And so you can equip 3 additional passives for PvP. You get to choose what they are. That's up to you. And if you get serious about PvP, you're going to want to look into a PvP loadout for your talents, because the optimal loadout for talents for PvP is going to be a little bit different than your optimal loadout for talents in PvE. Because in PvE, you really don't get hit, so you don't need as much defense, you don't need as much survivability, you just need all offense. You turn yourself into a glass cannon, that's PvE. In PvP, you need to crowd control the enemy so that they can't heal themselves, so that you can finish them off, right? So you're much more durable in PvP, and you're much more worried about your ability to CC enemies, right? So your talents are going to look a little different depending on whether you're PvPing or not. So you would have a PvP loadout in here and a PvE loadout in here for your spec. Then finally, we have the spellbook, which we touched on briefly. This is what you get at the very beginning. In here, you can always search for something if you're not sure. Maybe you know you have it, but you don't know where it is. And you could be like, oh man, I know I've got a barrier ability. So you just search and then all the barrier abilities will pop up here and you can see what they do. Make sure that you have them on your bar so that you can use them when you need them. Now, when it comes to your abilities, there's one thing to really keep in mind and to kind of take note of, and look at all of your abilities and look for the ones that have the long cooldowns. And the ones with the long cooldowns, those are the ones you're going to want to put off to the side or under shift or under control, you know, your second or your third bar, because one, you're not going to be using them constantly. So it's okay if they're just a little bit harder to hit. And two, you don't want to hit them on accident because they're very important. You have burst windows in World of Warcraft, and your burst windows, these are your phases where you're doing the most damage. And these are the results of you using your abilities with long cooldowns. So people will say, I'm popping my cooldowns. That means they're going to pop a number of their abilities that have long cooldowns. And these abilities might say something like, for 5 seconds, you do 20% more damage. Or a tank's cooldown would say something like, for the next 10 seconds, you take 50% less damage, right? And so there's offensive cooldowns, there's defensive cooldowns. But when you hear your group saying, pop your cooldowns, that's what they mean. They want you to pop your DPS cooldowns because they're going to pop their offensive cooldowns, which might even buff you. So if you're doing 20% more damage and then they buff you for 50% more damage, you know, your 20% plus that 50%, your 20% increased damage does a lot more when you're attacking 3 times as fast because you've got some buffs on you. And then you've got passives in here. If it says passive, you don't have to worry about it. You just need to know it's a good idea to read it, see what it does, so you understand what your character's doing. A lot of what determines how your build operates is the passives that are kind of functioning under the hood. So just kind of read your passives and be aware of them, but you don't have to stress too much. And then just be aware of the fact that some classes have very utility-based skills. So for example, the mage I'm on right here, you can conjure refreshments. So your party might ask you to conjure some refreshments. They'll say, can you make some drinks? Can you make some food? The mage is the only class that can just summon with magic health and mana regen consumables for their party. And the group can use these in between big pulls and things like that to top off their health and mana. Or they might ask you for a portal back to a certain town after a dungeon's over, after a raid's over. So that would be an example of utility abilities that the mage has. The warlock can summon people to a raid, right? So warlocks are really nice to have because of their summon ability. And so just keep an eye out for utility abilities out there like that. And if your party's asking you for something and you don't understand why, it might be that you are playing a class that has a utility ability that's helpful to the group. The next tab we have here is achievements. This is just going to be a collection of all the achievements you've earned. And the best thing about achievements now is going to be the fact that the warband system makes it so that you can collect achievements across all of your characters rather than just having to do it one at a time. So if you are someone that has played the game before and you did a little bit of the game on multiple different characters, now it can sum those achievements up and show you all of the ones that you've earned in one place. It's really nice. Then we've got the quest log. The quest log is going to show you all of the quests that you've accepted. Of course, you can click on those and it's going to show you where the quest is located, what you have to do in text form here, what your reward is going to be that you're going to receive. All that good information can be found in your quest log. And one of the nice things about the quest log is it's also showing up over here on your screen. And so for instance, we've got this quest right here and you see this item. When there's an item that you need to use for a quest, it puts it right here on screen so that you don't have to fumble through your bags and look for it. And also a lot of times it'll be a nice reminder that, hey, once you get to the mob, you have to use this item on it. Yeah, it's very easy to forget that. You run over there, you just kill the mob and you're wondering why you're not getting completion for the quest. Well, it's because you needed to use the item. Or in this case, it says speak to Ilaria, and the fastest way to get to her is just to use this Dalaran Hearthstone and teleport there. So it's saying, hey, use this item. So I can just click that rather than go find the Dalaran Hearthstone and teleport to her. Now, anytime you open up the log, you're going to be opening up your map, and the map has a lot of good information on it. You can minimize the log information if you want, and all you want to see is the map. You can open the map by pressing M and it will show right up. And if you want to do full screen, you know, maybe you want to see a bigger version of the map for clarity, you can click on that arrow right there. You can also click it again and it will bring it back down into form. So when you're in the map, you can right click to zoom out. Right click again to zoom out. Now, if you're playing this game as a Horde member, it's likely that most of your time is going to be spent in Kalimdor. That's the predominantly Horde continent. And then Eastern Kingdoms is the predominantly Alliance continent. Though you've got a little bit of Horde going on over here and a little bit of Alliance going on over here. It's not cut and dry. And now with the new expansion, you're getting funneled into Dragon Isles as soon as you hit level 10 and finish the level 1 through 10 tutorial experience. Then you get sent to Dragon Isles, and this is where you'll go from 10 to 70, more or less. And at 70, you're going to head on to the War Within expansion. Now, when you're on a continent like this, you can fly from one end to the other. You can get on a mount and you can just fly, and there's no load screens whatsoever. However, when you are trying to change continents, you're going to maybe get on a boat or a Zeppelin and you'll hit a little bit of a load screen going from one to the other. Now, the next tab would be guilds and communities. Guilds and communities are great for finding people to do whatever you like doing with, right? So I recommend joining a guild or a community. Now, the main difference between guilds and communities is you can be in one guild, but you can be in many communities. That's the primary difference. Your guilds can also activate buffs and things like that, and you can contribute towards your guild's reputation. So your guild is probably the most serious commitment of the bunch. And then communities, well, anybody can be in a community. So if you've got lots of friends, but you're spread across different guilds, you can create a community so that you all have one home inside of that community. I highly recommend finding a guild or a community that likes doing the things you like doing. If you find that you like collecting transmogs so you can make your character look really cool, then look for a guild or a community that collects transmogs, does a lot of transmog runs or farms. If you like raiding or doing dungeons, again, look for a guild or community that enjoys doing those things, and it's going to enhance your time in World of Warcraft. MMOs are definitely one of those genres where you get out what you put in. So the more effort you put into finding a community and a home inside of your MMO, the more fun you're going to have inside of that MMO as you sign on and you've got people greeting you. Oh, hey, so-and-so, what are you doing today? And you tell them what you're doing and they ask to join you or you ask to join them, right? And there's always that camaraderie, that community feel. And it's one of the best parts about getting engrossed in an MMO. So I highly recommend, just give it a chance, try to find a community for you. Next, we have the Group Finder. So the Group Finder is going to come into play as you're leveling up and you decide you want to start jumping into dungeons. So you've got the Dungeon Finder, shows right up here at the top, and you can check what role you want to fill. Do you want to be the tank, the healer, or the DPS? I'm on a mage, so it's only letting me choose DPS because I would just be griefing the group if I was allowed to choose tank. Some MMOs let you queue up as any role, even though you're not that role. It's really unfortunate. I love that WoW restricts you to the role that you're actually capable of playing. This is cool. And it tells you that using the Dungeon Finder, you get extra rewards, and it tells you what those rewards are going to be right here. Tons of experience and some gold. So you can use this to find a group. All you have to do is click find group and it'll find a group for you. To determine what type of content you want, if there's a specific dungeon you want to do, you can click this drop down and do specific dungeons. If you want to do a Dragonflight dungeon, you can choose a random Dragonflight dungeon, right? It's really up to you which dungeons you run, and you might have various different reasons for running any dungeon. It might be a quest, it might be a cosmetic, or you might be in there for the experience. The next is going to be Raid Finder. So in WoW, there is a Raid Finder. This allows you to queue into raids. Now, the nice thing about Raid Finder is it's very easy to get into a group and into a raid. The downside of Raid Finder is these are the least organized raid groups, right? You've got a lot of people that are inexperienced. You've got a lot of people that maybe even unqualified. They don't have quite the gear maybe they should, or the knowledge. Maybe they didn't look up how to do a boss before they entered, right? And so they spend most of their time dead while you're running through the raid. So when using Raid Finder, I highly encourage you to bring with you all of your patience, maybe even a drink or a cocktail, and just get comfortable and have a good time. Raids are a lot of fun, and Raid Finder can be a lot of fun, but only if you bring patience and the mindset that you're going to have fun while you're in there. Now, because of the inherent disorganization involved with Raid Finder, your group is queued into the easiest version of that raid. Each raid has multiple difficulty. You've got the Raid Finder difficulty, then you've got heroic and mythic, right? And the difficulty of the raid determines the rewards that you get in that raid. So the harder the difficulty, the better the gear is in there. So typically what you would do is you would go and you would do dungeons and mythic dungeons, and you would do mythic keys to get mythic dungeon gear. And that gear is going to make you strong enough to jump into the various versions of the raid. The mistake I made when I came back to WoW was thinking that I could level up and then go get my gear inside of raids. I was like, oh, the best gear's in raids. I want to go into raids and get my raid gear. No, that's a horrible idea. One, because it can be difficult to get gear in a raid, right? Because you've got 10 or 20 people in the group, the boss drops 1 or 2 items, and there's a big chance you don't get it. And so you're running around the raid with subpar gear. So you're going into the raid every week and you're not getting upgrades very fast. Whereas you could just go into dungeons and you could get gear that was just as good, maybe even better, depending on what difficulty of dungeon you're doing, and taking that into the raid with you to then ultimately get the best raid gear. All that to say, the dungeon gear that you get when pushing your mythic keys up is some of the best gear in the game, and you should absolutely go and grab it, especially if you're going to be jumping into raids. As I mentioned, the Raid Finder is going to put you into the easiest version of the raid. So then how do you get into the more difficult versions of the raid to get the better gear? Well, that's where pre-made groups come in. So if you know you want to do raids, maybe Dragonflight raids or War Within raids will show up as soon as War Within comes out in a couple days, you will be able to look for groups here. You can either start a group or you can find a group, click find. It's going to show us all the raid groups trying to be formed right now and for what raid they're looking to form a group for. Pre-made groups is one way to get into raids. However, once again, I really recommend if you find yourself enjoying raiding, which many people do, it's one of the most popular parts of World of Warcraft, then join a raiding guild. And that way you don't have to fight for a spot every week to get into one of these raid groups and hope that this random person on the internet lets you in and chooses you and has you join, and then you potentially get rejected or turned down because somebody with better gear is also applying for that same spot. Instead of dealing with that stress, you join a raid guild and you have your spot locked in, and you just know, hey, I show up at 7 p.m. on Tuesdays and my raid runs it. We have a good time. We progress together. And you don't have to worry about if you're going to get in or not. Now, like many of these other panels, we've got multiple tabs at the bottom here. So this was the dungeon and raid section. Then we've got player versus player. So here you can go in quick match and you can quickly match into battlegrounds, epic battlegrounds, arena skirmishes, brawls, right? There's different types of PvP. Then you've got rated. So if you get more serious about it and you want to improve your rating and hunt for rewards, if you climb high enough in rated PvP, you can earn better gear. You can also earn great cosmetics and mounts and stuff like that. So if you get into PvP, there's a lot of rewards. This is one thing that WoW does incredibly well. No matter what you are interested in, whether it's PvE or PvP or open world, there are paths to really cool cosmetics and really cool mounts in all of these things. So just find the thing you enjoy and do a lot of it, and you'll get some really cool stuff out of it. Next, we've got mythic dungeons, which I've kind of touched on briefly earlier. I said you should be doing these to get really good gear in between your raids. So if you go to a raid and you notice that, hey, I'm pretty low on the DPS chart, well, it's likely that the other people in your raid have been pushing their mythic dungeons. They've been going and running mythic dungeons. And the way these work is you go and do a mythic dungeon, then you get a key. Let's say you get mythic 2, right? And now you go into a tier 2 mythic dungeon. If you beat that at the end, you can get a tier 3 key. And then you can go into a tier 3 mythic dungeon all the way up to tier 10. They've compressed it now. So now the mythic dungeons go from 1 to 10, 10 being the hardest and 10 having the best rewards. But if you fail a mythic 5, then you might go back down to doing mythic 4s, right? Whereas raids lock you out for a certain period of time after you complete them. You can only do a raid every so many days. Mythic dungeons, you can just queue up over and over and over and farm out as much of the loot in those as you want. And that's why they're so effective for increasing your character's item level, because you can run it over and over until you get the best gear in that mythic dungeon. Whereas a raid, you get to run it and then you've got to wait multiple days until that lockout period ends and you can run it again. In the time it took you to get 1 piece of raid gear, you could get 10 pieces of mythic dungeon gear. Now, that was a very surface level description of mythic dungeons. So let's dive a little deeper into it now. So if you right click on your portrait, you can choose dungeon difficulty and you can choose between normal, heroic, and mythic. Normal is going to be the easiest, heroic is going to be in the middle, and mythic is going to be the hardest. And then mythic is going to have 10 different tiers attached to it. So you can do mythic 0 or a mythic dungeon, and then you can get a key to go into mythic 1 through 10, 1 being the easiest and then 10 being the hardest mythic dungeon in the game. So when you complete that M0 dungeon or the mythic 0 dungeon and you get a mythic key, you might get a mythic 1 or a mythic 2 key as a reward, and it's going to look something like this. Here we have a keystone, Halls of Infusion, mythic level 2. So I would be able to take this and go into a mythic dungeon and place this into the font of power inside of the mythic dungeon, and that would change it to a mythic level 2 dungeon. If I complete that mythic 2 dungeon, then at the end, it's going to give me a mythic 3 key. If I complete it really fast, it might give me a mythic 4 or a mythic 5, right? It might go up more than 1 level. It might go up 2 or 3, depending on how fast we complete the dungeon. There's going to be a timer on your screen and you have to beat the dungeon before the timer runs out. The more that you beat that by, the more likely you are to add more than 1 level to your key. Alternatively, if you fail the dungeon, there's one other meter that you're going to have to pay attention to while you're running through the dungeon. And that's also going to be on the right side, and it is the percent of the enemies that you've killed. Now, you don't have to kill every enemy in the dungeon, but you do have to kill enough of them to fill this meter to 100%. So the strategy in the dungeon is to kill as few enemies as possible while still filling this meter up to 100%. That way you're still completing it as fast as possible and you're not killing a bunch of stuff that you don't need to. Now, what happens if you fail the dungeon, if you're unable to beat it in time? In that case, your key is going to go down a level. So if you went in with a mythic 2 and you failed it, you'd come out the other end with a mythic 1 key. You can never have more than 1 key in your inventory at a time. The last thing you have to do while you're in the dungeon is kill the bosses. These aren't going to progress the meter, but they are necessary to complete the dungeon. As you probably guessed, the higher the tier of the dungeon, the better the gear. In fact, the higher levels of the mythic dungeons give you better gear than the lower difficulty raids. So what players do is they go into the mythic dungeons and get really good gear, and then they take that into the raids to help them clear those raids. So that's what mythic dungeons are, but how do you find a group for one? So what you can do is press Shift H. That's going to bring up your dungeons and raids menu here. Now there's no queue system for mythic dungeons, so what you're going to have to do, as we mentioned, is come to the pre-made group section, click on dungeons, and then you're either going to start a group if you want to use your key and advance your key, or put your key at risk. Or if you want to use someone else's key and put their key at risk or advance their key, you'll click Find Group and you'll join their group. They'll put their key in the font of power, and their key is going to be the one that levels up at the end of it. So it's really up to you which way you go. Maybe you're looking to go into a specific dungeon because, as we mentioned, the keys are dungeon specific. This key is for Halls of Infusion. What if I needed a specific piece of gear from a different dungeon? Well, then I would be looking for someone who had that key, or I would be looking to beat my dungeon so that it would give me a new key to a new dungeon. So that would be what determined if you wanted to start a group or find a group. Now, if you click Start Group, you're going to be entering things like what dungeon, what difficulty. You're going to choose the title of it, right? So in the title, you're going to want to put what difficulty it is, what mythic tier it is, or any other information you feel is relevant for your run. Maybe, no stress, no drama, fun run, whatever, laid back. Or if you're a new player, you could say new player run or first time tanking, whatever. And then people come into the run with the right expectations for what kind of a group it's going to be. They're not expecting to blow through it. They know they're a new player. And then there's going to be a lot of new players who are looking for exactly that type of group. They're looking for a group of inexperienced people who aren't going to get mad when they make a mistake. And then down here, you can say goal, standard, completion, beats timer. You can choose minimum item levels if you don't want people in there below your item level, or there's just an item level that's just way too low for that dungeon. Then you can choose what the minimum item level is. Once you get experienced with these, you'll get a feel for what item level is going to be needed to beat what tier. You'll fail some and you'll be like, okay, man, we went in there too early. We need higher item level. You come back, you beat it later. You can choose whether people are going to need a voice chat program like Discord to complete the dungeon together. Some of them do require a little bit of communication, or they benefit heavily from a little bit of communication, but it's not required. A lot of groups run without voice chat. So once you've filled out all of this information, then you can go ahead and list your group. Alternatively, if you wanted to find a group, this is what you would be looking at. This is all the information you just filled out in the create a group. Here, this person put +7, so it's a mythic, and it's telling you it's a +7 mythic. It tells you the map, and it tells you what roles they have and which roles they need. So they have 1 DPS, which tells you they need 2 more DPS, a tank, and a healer, because every group is going to have 1 tank, 1 healer, and then the rest DPS, right? That's going to be your typical formula. So this group right here has a healer, 3 DPS, so they're waiting for a tank to apply. Now, when someone applies to your group, you'll get a screen that looks a little bit like this, and it'll tell you their role and their gear score. So okay, they're the right role and their gear score is reasonable, so we can let them in, or we can reject them because we don't need any more of that role. It'll also tell you what their mythic dungeon rating is. And to find out what your mythic dungeon rating is, you just click mythic dungeons right here. And this page has a lot of important information as well. So right here, it's going to tell you your mythic rating. I don't have one on this character, so it says 0, but your rating would be right there. And then above that, right here, it tells you what the affixes are for this week. These affixes change once a week. And so as you go into higher tier difficulty keys, the enemies get one of these affixes, and then it gets to a higher tier, and they get the second one, and you get to another higher tier, and they get the third one. So if you're doing a mythic 0, they won't have any of these. But if you're doing a mythic 10, they're going to have all 3 of these. This one here, fortified, it says non-boss enemies have 20% more health and inflict up to 20% more damage. Incorporeal, while in combat, incorporeal beings periodically appear and attempt to weaken the players. And then the last one, sanguine, when slain, non-boss enemies leave behind a lingering pool of ichor that heals their allies and damages players, right? So this is dropping dots on the ground and healing enemies that you're fighting. So you're going to constantly have to move the mobs that you're fighting around so that they're not standing on top of a heal on the floor that's also hurting you. And there's plenty of other effects that can buff the enemies or put annoying dangers on the map around you while you're trying to fight the enemies, like tornadoes or explosions on the floor, right? All kinds of stuff to get in your way while you're trying to fight them. can appear right here. Now, the way loot works is when you run dungeons, you'll loot the enemy and you get your own personalized loot. That's how the dungeon loot works. You loot the boss and you either get the item you're trying to get from that boss or you don't. It's your own instance loot. When you're in a raid, however, which is 10-man content and beyond, when someone loots the boss, you'll see this pop up at the top of the screen. All the items the boss dropped will be rolled off. So you're rolling literal in-game dice. So the dice will roll from 1 to 100. The person with the highest roll wins. So the way this works is if you need the item, you click on the dice on the far left. The dice is for need. And if you ever forget what these are, you can hover over them in game while they're up and it says it. It'll say need, greed, transmog, disenchant, pass. And so the order of priority that the game takes is if someone rolls need on something, they get it before the person rolling transmog. And the person rolling transmog gets the item before the person rolling greed. And the person rolling disenchant and greed gets the item before the person rolling greed. And then greed gets it last. So essentially the order of priority goes need, transmog, disenchant, greed. So if 10 people roll greed and one person rolls need, the person that rolls on need is going to get it no matter what. The game's prioritizing the person that needs it. They need it because it's an upgrade. And so that's how you're going to look at this. If you need the item, in other words, if the item is an upgrade for you, it's an item you need, right? You don't have to feel bad about hitting the need button on an item as long as it's better than what you're wearing. So that's when you would need it. If it's an item that's not an upgrade for you, but it is a cosmetic that you don't have, it's a transmog that you don't have yet. Every time you collect an item, that item is added to your transmog so that you can apply it to your look in the game. So people are big on collecting transmogs in this game, right? And so if nobody needs it, then it can be handed off to someone that needs it for their transmog. And if nobody needs it for transmog, it can be handed off to someone that needs it for disenchant. And if nobody needs it for disenchant, it'll be handed off to whoever wins the roll for greeting it. Greeting usually just means you're going to sell it to an NPC and you don't need it for anything else. Now, if you're not going to use any of the other buttons, then you should pass on it so that the item can be handed to somebody in a reasonable amount of time. Until everybody has clicked one of these buttons, the item is held in limbo until the timer expires. And if somebody needs that item and it's an upgrade for them, you want to hit pass so that they can get the item and get it equipped right away, because it's just going to help the group for them to be wearing better gear during the next fight that you're engaged in. So that's how loot in raids works. It's literal dice rolls, and the priority goes need, transmog, disenchant, greed, and then of course if you hit pass, it means you're passing on it altogether. Okay, now let's talk about the vault. This is a really important feature in World of Warcraft, War Within. So you're going to have a vault on your minimap. It's going to look like this. You'll see like a little key symbol, keyhole right there, like that, and you'll head to it. And once you get there, you'll interact with the vault door itself, and then you're going to be presented with a screen that looks a lot like this. And now I'm bringing this one up here from Wowhead because they have updated this. They've just changed it. So there's a change coming to the vault, and by the time you watch this, this is what it's going to look like instead. There's no longer going to be a PvP line on the vault. They're replacing that with World. This is going to reduce the RNG in PvP gearing and give players more agency in what gear they receive. So the PvPers are going to be subjected to a lot less luck, you know, in trying to gear out their characters. However, what they're doing is they're putting World here, and World is going to include things like the brand new delve system. So you'll be able to go and run your delves as a solo player and level up the world track on this system. So the way this works is it's going to tell you if you defeat 3 bosses, 5 bosses, 7 bosses in raids or something along those lines, then each one you do, if you do 3 bosses, you're going to get this. If you do 5, you're going to get 2 items unlocked. And if you do 7 bosses, you'll get 3 items unlocked. And at the end of the week, you get to choose one of these. Once a week, it resets. So when it resets, you'll be able to come and claim your rewards. In this example, they were able to unlock everything in the first tier. So they get to pick 1 from the top row. They unlocked 2 things from the second row. So they would look at the items, see which one they need more. You know, maybe 1 is a weapon and 1 is boots, but they need the weapon way more. So they'd grab the weapon instead. And then in the world section, they didn't unlock anything. They didn't complete 1 delve. So they failed to unlock even the first activity, which is too bad because completing 1 delve would have been really easy. 4 delves would have got the second one, and 9 delves would have got the third. Each delve is going to take about 15 minutes to start, and you might be able to do them a little bit faster as you get more experience, especially the lower level delves. So you'll be able to get these first 2 in under an hour, no problem, every week if you want to. All of this to say, once you've played all the way through the War Within and you get to what is called the end game, you get to the point of the game where now you're going to be doing the dungeons, the raids, mythic dungeons if you're up for it, or the world content, right? If you're you're a solo player, you'll be doing world content and leveling this up. Once a week, just make sure you stop by, see what you unlocked, and then pick your best reward from each of these things. This is an incredible way to improve the gear on your character week over week, even if you have bad luck. And what this is probably best for is kind of a little bit of a pity system. So let's say you go raiding, right? You've got 10 to 20 guys in your raid group and you don't get the drops. Well, fear not, you come to your vault that week and boom, you have 3 items to choose from just because you went to the raids. Even though you may not have won the rolls on the items that you needed in the raid, you'll get it here. Same thing for the dungeon. If you're having bad luck, you get 3 extra chances to get something that you need, and with the delves down here as well. Now let's talk about soulbound items in this game versus warbound and beyond. So the way soulbound items work is if you pick one of these up, you can only trade it with someone that was there for the kill and someone that meets the criteria necessary to receive the item in the first place, and it has to be within 2 hours of the item dropping. So if you run a raid, you can trade this item with anybody else that was in the raid with you when that enemy was killed. If they joined the raid after you killed the enemy, you can't trade it with them. Or if you wait longer than 2 hours, you won't be able to trade it with them. This item will become bound to you after 2 hours. Or if you equip it, it becomes bound to you. So items generally will fall into 2 categories: bind on pickup or bind on equip. Now for warbound items, these are items that you can put into your war bank and pass between all of your characters. So sometimes you'll find a good item, but it'll be warbound. Now you can hand it off to one of your alts. This is a brand new feature. These types of items didn't really used to exist before. This is one more way Blizzard is trying to make this game a little bit more alt friendly. And of course, if you didn't know, alts are alternate characters. You have your main character that you play most often, and then you would have other characters that you made that are perhaps lower level that you haven't played as much, and these would be considered alts. Another thing you might notice on gear is that it's bind on pickup or bind on equip. So some items, just picking them up binds that item to you, and someone might ask for it and you'll be like, oh, it won't let me trade it to you. That's probably because it's bind on pickup and the game's not going to let you trade it to anyone the second you pick it up. So what you have to do in some situations is let the person that's going to use it pick it up if possible. Now, another type of item in this game is going to be the bind on equip. So you can pick it up like this soulbound item here. Soulbound and warbound items are going to be bind on equip. If you ever equip them, they're going to bind to your character. The game's always going to warn you. It'll say, if you equip this item will become bound to your character and it's going to be untradeable. So you don't have to worry about knowing if an item's going to bind to you or not. The game's going to tell you the second you try to equip it. Next to that, we've got Warband Collection. So Warband Collections is going to be where you've got your mounts, your pets, your toys, your heirlooms, your appearances. So basically any cosmetic, any collectible, anything that you can earn by playing this game or sometimes buy in the cash shop, it's going to be in here. Mounts are one of those things. You'll collect a lot of mounts by playing this game. A lot of players fall into one of these categories where they either become incredible transmog collectors or they become incredible mount collectors or pet collectors or some combination of the 3, right? A lot of players are going to fall into those categories. As they say, fashion is the end game, and this is where you're going to be able to see all of the fashion that you've unlocked and use it at a transmog station. We'll talk about using transmog stations in a moment here so you can see how that works, because that's going to be a lot of people's favorite part of the game in the long run. But from here, you can click on a mount, drag it onto your bar, and that way, anytime you want, you can jump on that mount and fly it around. You can press Shift P to open this up at any time. And let's go. And then same thing for the pets. If you want to summon pets, or if you want to get into pet battling. Pet battling is a whole other thing. It's a monstrous aspect in World of Warcraft. If you like Pokemon, you might like pet battling. You can collect pets and you'll see they have different stats that they unlock as you level them up, as they get stronger. And then you can fight other pets and you can win those battles, lose those battles. And the more achievements and the more accomplishments that you get inside of this pet battling system, the more cool cosmetics that you can unlock along the way. Now with DRAGONFLIGHT, we got the addition of SKYRIDING. So now we've got 2 different types of flight. You've got SKYRIDING and then you've got STEADYFLIGHT. And SKYRIDING is going to make it so your character can fly much, much faster, but it's also a little bit skill based. So you will see that I press a button and the wing flaps and now I'm going faster. I can gain elevation, but if I just keep going up, I'm going to lose momentum and I'm going to start falling slow. So you have these charges. See these charges here? They're kind of landing over top of my bars. It's looking pretty messy right here. We'd have to fix that, but it's kind of a cool little mechanic that exists inside of the game now. It's a much more engaging flight system, and also much faster, much faster than steady flying. But steady flying, some people enjoy it when they're just kind of cruising around the game because there's no effort involved. You just point your character in a certain direction and you steadily fly there, slowly but surely. So skywriting, you'll unlock it while you're playing through Dragonflight, and it has skills and unlocks. So while you're playing through Dragonflight, you're going to be collecting tokens, you're going to be leveling up your ability to dragon ride or sky ride, and you'll be able to pick which passives you unlock and level all of these passives up that just make your character better at skywriting, so it's easier to do it for longer. And then eventually you get to a point where you can literally skyride infinitely. You'll never run out of charges because they're always coming back anytime your character's moving fast enough. So right now you see that wind flying. So now you'll see the charges filling up because we've got that momentum. So anytime you're moving fast enough, it's charging. And it's real easy to keep yourself moving fast enough for those charges to come and go up. Even as I'm going up, it's charging soon. So that is skywriting in a nutshell. It's really fun. You'll get the hang of it really fast. Great addition to the game. Shout out to Guild Wars 2 for inventing it, and shout out to WoW for being smart enough to borrow it. Next, we've got the toy box. The toy box, man, this is kind of your catch-all. Toy boxes can be Hearthstones. They'll teleport you to a place. Like this one, it can teleport me to Dalaran every 20 minutes. This one can teleport me to Deep Dwellers. And this one can be used to give me a crab knife. And this one can turn me into a Starcatcher. We do that, and I do a little emote. This one can summon a cooking pot. All that to say that toys can be a lot of different things. Next, we have heirloom. So heirloom gear used to be a lot more useful than it is now. This is something that's kind of been deprecated by the game. So it used to be that heirloom gear would significantly increase your leveling speed on alts. It would give you huge experience gain buffs. You get a lot more experience per kill than without it. They kind of removed all of that, and now it just removes how much rested XP is removed while wearing it. So it's still kind of useful if you have it laying around, but it's not something that you need to seek out and spend a ton of money assembling like you used to. But if you're a completionist and a collectionist, there is a tab for it and you can get all of it and you can max it out. You can upgrade each piece so that it has a higher potential level. The way heirloom gear works is you put it on at level 1 and it scales with your character as you level up. So you never need to replace it as you're leveling. It just keeps getting better the higher level you are. Finding gear upgrades is kind of an essential part of playing an MMO though, and it seems like the developers agreed. So they've kind of removed the need to use it while you're leveling to bring back that hunt for better gear as you're leveling up. And then finally, we got the appearances tab. So in the appearances tab, you can see all of the cosmetics that you've unlocked for your character. We can look at helmets that we've unlocked and we can try those on. So if you control click, you can see what it looks like on your character, and we could click on weapons and we could say, oh man, but what do my other weapons I've collected look like? Okay, this weapon's cool. Oh man, that one's really cool. What about this one? Or what about this one, right? And so you can switch through the different weapons that you've earned and see what they would look like in here. Now, you cannot just open this menu and change your appearance. To do that, you actually have to go to a transmog specialist. So for the Horde, we're going to head over to this guy here, talk to him. You'll see this symbol when you hover over him, right? If it's a transmog person. And you say, shall we begin? I want to transmogrify my gear. Here you have a very similar window to what we were just looking at. And we can view the things we've unlocked. Say we don't want that goofy helmet on my character anymore. We don't like it. Gosh. So we can hide that helmet. And let's say we wanted a different weapon. You know, we've collected a lot of weapons. Maybe we want something a little cooler looking or a little different looking, or maybe we want to change our color palette, right? So you would come in here, choose it, and then you just click apply and it's going to tell you how much gold it's going to cost. Transmogging can cost a lot of gold, especially for a new player. 145 gold can feel significant early on. The unfortunate thing about transmog in WoW is the transmog is not bound to the item slot. So as soon as you upgrade that piece of gear, you lose that transmog. Let's say I changed the way that my chest looked. I wanted something different. Let's say I change it to this. As soon as I find a chest upgrade, I'm going to lose this transmog because this is being applied to that specific piece of gear. So I'll have to come back here and spend another 50, 100 gold to make my chest look the way I wanted it to again. So as you're leveling up and changing gear constantly, it might not be worth transmogging. This is one of the few things that WoW still hasn't fixed that I would love to see fixed one day, is make transmog apply to the slot rather than the item, so that when we find upgrades or we change out one piece of gear, we don't have to remog ourselves. Now, another really cool thing that's easy to miss in here is your weapon enchantment. So you can click on this and you can add enchantments to weapons. Now this weapon's already got a lot going on, so it's not quite as noticeable, but it's adding a different like glow effect to this weapon. If we come to something like a little less flashy here, so you can see these a little better. Let's say we picked this one here. Now you can see that effect, and this one adds like a yellow glow to it. This one adds this mist or this smoke coming out of it. This one's adding this purple glow. Hopefully you can see these on YouTube. Some of these are pretty subtle, so if you can't, it's not a big deal. There's a lot of different effects out there. A lot of them look way cooler than anything that I've unlocked on this account. Another thing that you can do here from the transmog menu is you can apply entire sets that you've collected. Oh man, I just want this whole set. I can put this on. Or in the transmog menu from our menu system, we can go to appearances, and then we can click sets up here, and we can browse sets and see where they're located, and then we can go farm them. So for instance, if we were scrolling through here, clicking on different sets, we could look at the Raging Tempest set and we could say, man, that looks cool. I like that, but what if it was a different color? So if you collect the war mode version of this set, then it's going to be yellow. If you collect the crafted version, it's red. If you collect the Forbidden Reach version, it's green. And if you collect the Primal Storms version, it's blue. And a lot of these sets have different variations like that, where you collect the different versions of them. If you happen to like a set, but you don't love maybe the color of that set, you can earn that set through different means, and it's a different color. For instance, if there's a set that comes from a certain raid, the heroic version of the set will come in one color, and then the mythic version will come in a different color. And the raid finder version would be in another color still. Next, you have the adventure guide. This can give you some ideas on maybe things to do and rewards to get for doing those things. If you're just looking for something to do, you're someone that's been playing the game for a long time, you might be looking for some fresh experience or some new reward that you can get. And here you go. You can come in here, you know, once you hit max level and you're looking for new things to do, this is going to be a great place to find them. And the next tab, of course, is going to be the shop. You can come in here and buy things like character transfers. Maybe your character is on a server that you don't want to be on anymore. You don't need these very much anymore because now you can play with anybody on any server and it's not really a big deal. But hey, if you happen to find yourself needing or wanting a character transfer, you can do that. So you can also buy pets and mounts, but WoW is fortunately one of the few MMOs where you can earn the coolest mounts and you can earn the coolest pets and you can earn the coolest cosmetics by simply playing the game. And I highly encourage you to try that. And then last but not least here, we've got the game menu where you can go into the options, you can go into the shop, you can go into your add-ons, which we'll dive into. You can go into what's new, you can go to edit mode, which we touched on earlier, macros we'll touch on in a little bit. Now you've probably heard of people mention the term tab targeting by now, especially if you've been watching videos about World of Warcraft. It's a tab target MMO, which means you can press tab on your keyboard. Right now this enemy is selected, right? There we go, they're selected. I press tab and now it switches over to this enemy. And so it's an easy way to toggle between enemies. If there was 3 enemies here, it would switch between the 3 enemies. And if you're fighting a large pack of mobs and you need to do something to a specific mob, you can always just click on the one that you want to attack rather than pressing tab and waiting for it to cycle through all of them. When you start doing mythic dungeons, for example, it's going to be really important that somebody kicks a certain mob whenever it starts casting a spell. And the whole group's going to take turns kicking them because kicks have a long cooldown. And kicks are a really important part of World of Warcraft. So let's talk about that really quick. Classes have their own way of kicking an enemy, or we call it kick, but it's an interrupt for their spell casting. So on the mage, we use counter spell. This is a 24-second cooldown interrupt that we can use. This is our kick. And so whenever we see an enemy start casting a spell that is interruptible, we press this button and it interrupts them. But then it's on cooldown for 24 seconds. And so the next person in the group will need to cast their kick the next time it does. And so the group will rotate, taking turns kicking the enemies that are casting spells. And so this is something that's going to separate the good players from the bad players when it comes to mythic dungeons. And so you're really going to want to put your class's kick somewhere where it's easy to reach, something that you can hit real quickly anytime you see an enemy cast bar, and your team will absolutely love you for it. When you're running around soloing and you see an enemy cast bar going, practice kicking, practice using your kick. Yeah, you could stand there and you could take the hit, but the sooner you develop that muscle memory to interrupt an enemy when they start casting a spell, the sooner you are to conquering one of the hardest parts about doing well in mythic dungeons. The difference between your party successfully kicking and interrupting enemy spells and not doing that is absolutely what is going to be the difference between passing some mythic dungeons and failing them. It's not a mechanic that your group can just completely ignore, because sometimes it's a heal, and if you guys don't interrupt that heal, the mob's just going to heal itself endlessly. Or sometimes it's an AoE damage ability that's just going to chew through your health, and all of a sudden your healer's not going to have any mana, and you guys are going to be wondering, why aren't you healing us? And they're going to say, I'm out of mana because nobody's interrupting the enemy that keeps damaging all of you with a mega damage ability. Sometimes the healer runs out of mana, and sometimes that's the group's fault for standing in the red or not interrupting with their kicks. So all that to say, put your kick somewhere that it's going to be real easy to hit. Mine here is on Q. So I press Q, and then my character casts my kick, and it interrupts the ability that that boss or that enemy is trying to cast. Get good at that, and you're already better than 90% of casual WoW players. If you're not sure what your class's kick is, just search for it on Google, and it'll come right up. It's a very common question, so it's an answer that's out there in abundance. Now let's quickly touch on aggro. It's an essential part of any MMO that has the trinity of tank, healer, and DPS. Tank's job in MMOs is to hold aggro. In other words, it is to keep the enemies attacking them, and every MMO handles aggro differently. In World of Warcraft, there's a lot of things that you can do to acquire aggro of the mobs and get them hitting you. If you're a damage dealer, you can do too much damage, or if you are a healer, you can cast too many heals and too many buffs, right? Casting a buff on an ally or a debuff on the enemy is going to add to your threat meter, and if your threat meter gets high enough, the enemy is going to start attacking you. The threat meter is this invisible meter that you don't see unless you have an add-on installed that displays it for you, that tracks how much threat you've developed, and if you have the most threat in the group, that enemy will attack you. Every enemy has its own threat meter that is basically tracking who it's the most angry at and who it's going to be attacking. Things that you can do to add to this threat meter are heal, buff allies, debuff enemies, attack enemies, or simply just taunting them if your class has a taunt ability. And because of the way that gear works in World of Warcraft, it is possible for a tank to be playing well, but for a DPS to strip aggro away from that tank, to strip the enemy's aggression away from it, right? And then the enemy starts attacking the DPS because the DPS's gear is better. If your gear score is way higher than the tank's gear score, it's going to be hard for him to hold the aggro. It's not that he's playing bad necessarily, it could just be that your gear is that much better than his. And so if you run into a situation like that, you're running a dungeon or you're running a raid and the tank's having a hard time keeping the threat on him, help him out by just backing off on your DPS just a little bit until he is doing a better job of maintaining the threat, or give him a little bit of a head start on the boss to develop a little bit of that threat before you start attacking it, right? These are all common strategies people sometimes have to use if the tank isn't the highest geared person in the group. This is one reason that a lot of times tanks will get gear priority in raids. It's to help make sure that they're not dying and that they're holding the threat of the boss. Now, next, let's talk about rotations. So, rotations. Every class's rotation is different. Every spec's rotation is different. So the game has dozens and dozens and dozens of different rotations that a player might need to know, which makes it impossible for me to tell you exactly what your rotation is going to be on your character. But what I can do is give you an add-on that will tell you what a very solid version of your rotation will be. And this add-on is a great training wheels add-on. It's called Heikili. Here it is right here. Heikili, Hekili. This is a fantastic add-on because what it does is it tells you your next 3 buttons, and you can have it tell you your next 5 or your next 2, however you like to show it. So right now, my add-on is telling me what it thinks my rotation should be, and it's fairly accurate. It's sometimes not perfectly optimal, but it's definitely good enough. I've used this add-on in groups to get middle of the pack DPS and upper middle of the pack DPS, no problem, right? So I'm a big believer in this add-on, especially for new players, because when you have this many abilities and you have no idea what you should be pressing. So it's telling me the first thing I need to do is put this buff on myself. I haven't even buffed myself yet. So, okay, I do that, right? And then it's saying, okay, so when you get up to that pack of enemies, it's telling me the first ability you're going to use is mirror image. So we'd use that. And then this one moves to the front and it says you're going to use this one here. So we're going to use evocation, right? And then it says next thing you're going to do is press R for this ability. Okay. And then 1 for this ability. Okay. And that one needs a target, so I can't press it. But right, you just hit the button 1, then 9, then 1, and you just hit whatever button pops up, and all of a sudden you're doing a really solid rotation without having any clue how your character works. But you'll start to learn that rotation, and you'll start to understand why certain abilities come before other abilities, or why they come after other abilities. And if you're not sure, just read the description of the ability. What is it doing? Why did I press that ability? Or why does this ability do so much damage? You don't read the tooltip, but until you understand your class, this is a great little helper, and it'll give you a single target rotation when you're fighting one enemy. It'll give you an AoE rotation when you're fighting many enemies, right? It's just a great add-on for new players to greatly shorten your learning curve and to make it look like you know what you're doing way before you know what you're doing. So, hey, Keely, check it out. Try that add-on. It's a good one. Now, when it comes to add-ons, I highly recommend using a program called CurseForge. So what you'll do when you go to download CurseForge, just search for download CurseForge. It'll pop right up and you'll get two options. The first one is download on Overwolf, which you don't need to do. That is just extra software they're trying to get you to engage with that you don't need in this situation. And then below that, you've got download standalone. This is the one you want. And that's going to give you this client right here. So once you've got this client right here installed, now you can browse, and fortunately one of the things it does is it sorts by default. It's going to sort by the most downloaded, right? So you can instantly see what the most popular add-ons are. And this is a pretty good indicator of whether it's worth having or not. So some of these you definitely won't need as a new player. You know, some of these things are very end game specific, but for the most part, they're going to be useful. So feel free to use this list to grab some that look particularly interesting to you. And then here you can check the featured. This is another way of them recommending certain ones to you. And then over on this tab, you can see the ones that you've actually downloaded. Over here, you can choose which version of the game. So if you have World of Warcraft Classic installed and you have Retail installed, you can switch between them right here. Or in my case right now, I've got the Retail beta client here and the Retail version. As far as other essential add-ons that I would recommend for everybody, one would be Deadly Boss Mods. This is a perfect add-on for any new player and any veteran player. It's almost mandatory when you're in raid groups. What Deadly Boss Mods or DBM does is it tells you what to do. So a boss will do a mechanic and it'll say, move away from your allies. And so then you go and you find a spot away from your allies, or it'll say, come in close to the boss, or move far away from the boss, because he's going to do some big AoE that'll hit anyone that stays too close, or he'll do a big AoE that hits anyone that stays too far away, right? This add-on is, once again, it's compressing your learning curve drastically. Eventually, you'll just be fighting the boss and you'll see the mechanic and you'll know what it's going to do. But until you've seen the mechanic a few times, you're going to have no way of knowing what you need to do. So Deadly Boss Mods is another great training wheels add-on that even the most experienced players in the game still use. Details. Details is the damage meter. This is what's going to tell you how much damage you're doing and how much damage other people are doing. If you're in a raid group or in a dungeon group, everybody in that group is running this add-on and they can see how much damage they're doing and they can see how much damage you're doing. So just because you can't see how much damage you're doing doesn't mean nobody else can. So this is a great way to kind of be aware of how well you're doing or not doing. As a new player, you're not going to be expecting yourself to do incredibly well, but with the Hikili add-on telling you what rotation to do, you're going to do fine. You might be lower middle, or you might even be bottom of the pack, but you're still going to be in the same ballpark as them, especially if you have similar high level gear, right? Now, the gear that you're wearing has a massive effect on the damage. Just because you and another person are in the same raid, it does not mean you're going to be doing the same amount of damage if you play equally. If they have higher item level gear than you, they're going to do way more damage than you. That's just how it works. Now, really good players can overcome the item level a little bit to do a little more damage than the average player would with that gear. But for the most part, having better item level gear means you're going to do more damage than people with lower item level gear. Next is GTFO. This is a really good one for new players because, wow, I would say it's not the best MMO when it comes to spell clarity. So like knowing what's going on the battlefield. You'll be standing there and there will be an enemy area of effect ability under you. And sometimes it's really obvious that that's what's happened and that's what you're standing in and that you need to get out of it. Other times, the terrain might obscure part of that AoE and so you don't see that you're standing on it. Or other times, the AoE will be a similar color to the floor, or it'll be really transparent and really faint and it won't be obvious that it's an enemy AoE that you need to get out of. Well, that's where GTFO comes in. If a bad AoE lands underneath you, you'll get a honk, like a literal beep that sounds a bit unpleasant. You know something bad's happening and you need to get out of it, and it'll keep beeping until you get out of that bad thing. So this is a great one, again, for new players to help them be aware of their surroundings. It's also especially great because as a new player, you tend to get stuck staring at your skill bar, right? You've got so many skills and you're trying to hit all the right abilities in combat, and it can be real easy to forget what's happening up here under your actual character. And so until you get a little more muscle memory, eventually your fingers know all these buttons, just like they know how to type on a keyboard. And you go to hit the Y key, your finger knows where the Y key is. You go to hit the A, S, D, F keys, right? Your fingers know where those are. Eventually this happens here. And so you can spend more time watching this, less time watching this. But until then, GTFO is great. And even after that, because sometimes you've got something on the second monitor, you're watching a video, you're watching Netflix and you're playing, and you need that little reminder, oh man, you're standing in something bad, you need to get out of it. Now, eventually down the road, you might get into weak auras. Weak auras can be incredibly powerful. Once you're doing some difficult content, someone might say, hey, get this weak auras or get that weak auras. And that's going to be when you dive into the weak auras rabbit hole and you start to unlock all of the power within. Another great one is Rare Scanner. This is going to tell you if there's a rare mob nearby, so you can go kill it if you want to. Sometimes rare mobs can drop good gear. Sometimes they can drop cool cosmetics, and sometimes there's achievements attached to killing them in general. So it's always nice to know where they are and if they happen to have spawned nearby. And they're called rare mobs because they're not always there, right? And so it takes a little bit of luck to run into them. So if you happen to be lucky enough to run into them, it's nice to kill them while they're there. So that's a really nice one to have on hand as well. Another one is Auctionator. Eventually, you're going to get to a point in the game where you're finding items, but you don't know what's trash and what's treasure, right? This happens in every game when you're new to it and you're wondering, should I sell this to a vendor, NPC, and just get a few, measly gold out of it? Or should I be selling this on the auction house for thousands of gold? What is it? And you don't know at first. Well, Auctionator tells you. So with Auctionator installed, what you'll have to do is go to the auction house, talk to one of the NPCs, click on the Auctionator tab and tell it to do a full scan. And what this is going to do is it's going to download, it's literally going to download the price of every item in the game. So you say full scan, it's going to do that. Give it a few moments. It's going to take a while because it's scanning a lot of items. And then down here, it'll say finished processing 26,000 items, right? Okay, great. So now that we've downloaded that, we can hover over items and see what they sell for. If we look at this skewered peanut chicken here, it says we could either sell it to a vendor for 13 silver, or we could try to sell it on the auction house for 12. So you'd actually get more at the vendor. So you're not going to be saving this to sell it on the auction house. You'll hover over a lot of items, and if there's no auction house price listed, it probably can't be sold on the auction house, likely because it's bound to you. Once you equip a piece of gear, it becomes bound to that character. It becomes soulbound, right? And so at that point, you can no longer sell that gear. Just be aware of that. So those are the big add-ons. Those are the ones I would absolutely install very soon, if not right away. I really enjoy those. I think that those add a ton of quality of life, but most importantly, they take you from being a new player to being an experienced player instantly, because you've got DBM telling you what to do during a boss fight. You've got details giving you instant feedback on if you're doing a good rotation or if you're not doing a good rotation, what's working, what's not working. You've got GTFO letting you know, hey, you're standing in something bad, you need to get out of it. You've got Auctionator instantly telling you if something's valuable or not. You've got Hakili telling you what your rotation is so that you can do good damage. All of those, they're giving you knowledge that it would take years to accumulate, and you get it instantly with a click of an add-on. So really cool stuff there. But now, speaking of the auction house, let's talk about the auction house in more detail. So the auction house is where you can obviously buy and sell things from other players. Let me turn off my add-ons so my auction house looks like your auction house. Okay, there we go. So here we've got the auction house. In here, you can buy items. You can click on certain tabs that you want to shop for. Maybe you're looking for armor. Maybe you're looking for containers, like a bag. Maybe you want a better bag, right? So you can search and you can see what's available. You can sort by the number of slots because you want a good bag. You don't want a crap bag. Oh, it looks like I could get a 32 slot bag for 15 gold. Fantastic. That's very affordable, right? And there's 3,000 of these available. So it would be very easy to come in here as a new player and buy better bags, because most likely you have really awful bags if you have any bags at all. Just down here, you've got 16 slot bags. They're only 4 gold, right? So there's plenty of bags that you could buy at all sorts of price ranges. Pick the ones that you'd like to grab and go with it. But what if you want to sell items on the auction house? Well, that's fortunately very easy. You can click here, and the auction house has, over the years, gotten better and better and better until you almost don't need any add-ons to use it. Really, honestly, you can get by without having any add-ons. The only reason I get Auctionator is so I can see what things are worth when I'm not at the auction house. Because now what happens when I want to sell this item? I just put it there, and the auction house instantly tells me what I could sell it for. It's basically going to try and undercut whatever the lowest price is on the auction house. So it'll sell right away. And it automatically does that on its own. You don't have to enter any of that value. So if you're not sure if something's worth something, you can always come here and try and check. Now, the only thing to be aware of with this is, what if you have a new player that doesn't know what something's worth and they list it for 500 gold? And then you go and you try to list it and the auction house automatically tries to sell yours for 499, and you've just shortchanged yourself, 30,000 gold. So the Auctionator add-on can be good for seeing those discrepancies in action, and then maybe trying to figure out, like, okay, who's right? Is it Auctionator or is the built-in auction house right in this situation? Now, it is going to cost money to sell things, but you're getting way more money than you're losing. But this is to prevent people from selling things that aren't going to sell, or asking prices that are never going to happen. It's a little bit of a tax each time you list something, right? And then once you've decided on the price you want to sell it for, the duration you want it to be up for, the longer the duration, the more the tax. So it's 3, now it's 6, right? And if I go down to 12, it's only 155. So the duration is what determines the deposit cost. Now, if the item doesn't sell, it's going to be mailed to you in your mailbox. If it does sell, someone's going to get it, and then the gold is going to be mailed to you in your mailbox. And then if you click the auctions tab, you can see what auctions are going on for you right now. Maybe you bid on something, or maybe somebody's bidding on your stuff, right? So that's the auction house. Really easy to use, really intuitive. Honestly, Blizzard has done a fantastic job in improving it, expansion over expansion, until it's turned into something I really am quite impressed with as far as MMO auction houses go. Now, we talked about the mail. So where is the mailbox? Well, can you open your map and see the mailbox on the map? No, unfortunately, you can't.
I'm going to kill myself, and it's your fault.
But if you're close to it, you'll see it on your mini map. So when you see an envelope like this one right here, you can run towards it. And there it is. That's the mailbox. And if you have purchased anything in the auction house, it'll be mailed to you. If you listed something for sale and it didn't sell, it'll be mailed to you. Or if you listed something for sale and it did, well, the gold will be mailed to you, right? It'll be here. And if you want to send things to other players, you can mail things to other players. Maybe you have a friend on a different place or logging on at a different time and you want to get them an item. You can just mail them items here. You can click send mail, and you can decide, oh, I want to send this item right here. It is going to have a little bit of a cost, and you can send it COD if maybe they want to buy it from you, right? And you can enter the amount that they have to send you before they can accept the item. So it lets you trade with people that way, without standing right next to them. Maybe they want to buy something, but you're out somewhere and they're somewhere else. You just have to make sure you specify who it's to. So you'll type their name there at the top. That's how you send things. Just be aware of the fact that when you send from one player to another player, it can take up to an hour. So that's a little bit of a delay if you send through the mail. And it used to be that you had to send things to yourself through the mail, which makes a great segue into the warband system. So with the warband system, we no longer have to mail things to our other characters through the mailbox. Now we can use the warband bank. So this is real easy to get. You do a quick little quest. You'll accept it when you log in, and then it'll send you down here to do a quest. You can either take a bat rider there or a griffin, right? You just ride the transport on the flight paths and it'll take you down there and you can do the quest. Your horde, follow the quest line. If you're alliance, it's just as easy. It took me probably 10 minutes to do the quest. Very easy. So the way it works is once you unlock it, you'll now be able to come to the bank and you'll have your tabs that you already had, which was the bank and the reagent bank. And now you'll have a warband tab, the warband bank. And the way this works is you buy the first one for next to nothing, then the next one for 25,000 gold, then the next one after that is 100,000 gold, right? So it's ramping in cost until it's into the millions. So it gets very expensive, very fast, but this is an account-wide bank. Everything here can be accessed by all of your characters. For the first time, this is here. This was just added to the game, so it's a great addition. And the best thing about this addition was at the same time, they made it so that items are warbound instead of soulbound. So a lot of the gear you find will be warbound, which means you can gear out alts without playing them. It used to be you level up a character to max level. And then when you start the new character, you started all over. You had 0 gear. You had to run the same mythic dungeons, run the same keys all over again to get your gear score up to within the same dimension as the other one, doing exactly what you did before. No longer. Now, when you're running a raid or a dungeon, there's a chance warbound gear will drop in there. And the warbound gear will be 1 tier lower than what is dropping in there for your character. So the soulbound gear, the gear that's only viable on your character, is 1 tier higher than warbound gear that drops in the same instance. In this way, you can get your alts geared up to just below where you're at on your main without even playing it, which is pretty cool. That was not a thing before. You used to have to do it all over again. I love this new system. So the Warband bank is just, it's such a phenomenal add to the game. Really enjoy it. And like I mentioned, it makes it real easy to transfer items from one character to another. And that's just one piece of the Warband system and the changes that came with that. Now, along with the bank, Warband came with those other changes that we touched on earlier very briefly. The more max level characters you have, the faster your alts level. They get that XP buff for each max level character. Very cool. You've got the account-wide achievements now with the Warband system. You've got the account-wide map progress, flight path progress, like all this stuff. So much of the game is now account-wide. The last time I reviewed WoW, a little over a year ago, one of the only complaints I had was the lack of alt friendliness in this game, and they have absolutely addressed it, which makes me so happy. So that's your Warband bank. The bank itself works, just like your inventory does. So you've got the bank, and then you can put bags in the bank. So if we come and talk to the banker, you have these bag slots at the bottom. You have to buy each of these with gold, but it's a pretty small amount of gold. I think it was 25 gold each. It's a trivial amount of gold to unlock each of these bag slots. And then you put a bag, you can now open these bags, each one of these, right? So now I've got all of these bag slots I can put stuff into along with my basic bank. And if I want more, I can put more here. So I just took that bag. It's a 4-slot bag. This is trash, but just for example, now I've got 4 more slots in here, right? Speaking of bags, I need to get some better bags on this character before War Within drops. I just leveled this character up, so he's missing a lot of basic stuff at the moment. Now, flight paths used to be a lot more important than they are now. I would say it used to be that it took a long time to get places without using the flight path. But now with the addition of skywriting in the game, you can move so fast on your mount. There's almost no reason to use flight paths except for when you just want to AFK travel to the other side of the world. So if you come talk to one of these flight path guys, you can see the symbol over his head, or you can see, let's move away from him on the map. Now you can see this little, shoe with wings on the map. So when you come and you talk to him, you can choose to go to any flight path that you've unlocked. You unlock a flight path simply by talking to the NPC. Once you talk to him, you can fly there. Simple as that. Or fly back to wherever else you came from. So this is good for AFK travel because it doesn't move super fast. It doesn't move necessarily in a straight line. If you're here and you want to go here, it might take you back to town and then go back down here, right? You never know what you're going to get until you've done it at least once. But until you have skywriting, it is incredibly useful. And even still useful when you just want, to travel across the continent without paying attention. So that's one version of fast travel. So another thing to be aware of with flight paths is you have got different color flight paths. So if we look at, for instance, this zone here, you can see this flight path is red. This flight path is gold. Red means it's a horde flight path. So Alliance members won't be able to use or see this flight path when they're looking at the map. This flight path is gold, which means it's neutral. So both Alliance and Horde can fly to this from their flight paths. So red is Horde only, yellow is neutral, both sides can use it. And then blue flight paths, only the Alliance can use. So the Horde won't be able to fly to them or see them. I'm on a Horde character right now, so I can't show you an example of a blue flight path. But I guarantee you there's one in here somewhere. So that's the flight path system. That's everything that you could possibly want to know about that. But how else can you get around? Well, of course, you've got your mount. Now, beyond mounts, you have zeppelins and you have ships. The zeppelins are flying blimps like this right here. You'll get on this, and this one's taking off to Dragon Isle. So I would get on this here, and it would teleport me to here, basically, right? There'd be a short ship animation. We'll ride this out into the void. We'll hit a load screen, and then before we know it, we're getting an animation of us going across the ocean and into the Dragon Isles. That's the zeppelins. Ships work exactly the same way, except instead of floating in the sky, they're down in the water, right? Here's a ship. So that's another form of fast travel, but those go to very specific locations. And then finally, you have portals. And there's a couple of ways to get portals in this game. One of the ways to get portals in this game is be a mage or know a mage. So we have skills as mages right here. We can open portals. So we can open a portal to anywhere that we want. So for instance, let's say I wanted to open a portal to Dalaran, right? So I just cast a spell. Now I've opened a portal to Dalaran. And now my friends can go through this. You know, my party can go through it. My raid members can go through it to get back home after a raid or to go somewhere to buy supplies, right? And I have, as you saw, a ton of different places that we can go. Portals stay open so other people can go through them. Alternatively, as a mage, we can just teleport. So if we want to teleport somewhere, we can. It just instantly takes us there, but nobody can go through it. Now, the one thing for mages to be aware of, because this happens all the time, if you create a portal for your friends to go through, but then you instantly go through it, it closes when you go through. So nobody goes through after you. So make sure you're the last person to use the portal that you summon as a mage, okay? Just a heads up. I don't think there's a mage out there who hasn't accidentally stranded someone somewhere because they forgot to wait for them to go through the portal. So hey, it happens. If you do it, don't feel bad, or maybe feel a little bit bad, but not too bad. Now, if you're not a mage, or if you're not in a party with a mage, there's one other way still, and that's going to be in major cities. There's oftentimes portal rooms, and these basically allow you to teleport to important locations throughout the game. As a new player, one of the hardest parts about this game is going to be learning to traverse the major cities, because when you're out in the open zones and you're exploring, the quests are largely leading you where to go, but sometimes you get sent to OGRIMMAR or Stormwind, and you're in the city and you have no idea where you're at or where you need to be. And eventually you start to learn it like the back of your hand. You start to learn the layout of the city and how to get from one place to another place and where all the important things are, right? You just learn by doing. You do it a few times and you know it. But until then, it's a little bit overwhelming, and that's normal. So don't feel bad when that happens to you. So here's the portal room. This is where it's located in OGRIMMAR, right here. Come down in here, and it goes to a number of different important locations throughout the game. If I click it, you can see it's instantly going to take me to Valdrakken, as it promised when I hovered over it, right? So now I am over here in Dragon Isles instantly. So I could have taken the Zeppelin, or I could have just walked through that portal to get here. So Zeppelins, they kind of fall into the category of largely deprecated content. A lot of times if there's a Zeppelin, there's an easier way to get there that's instantaneous, but not always, not always. Especially when you're low level or you don't have access to a mage or you haven't done a certain quest line yet or something. But the main thing to take away from the portal conversation is if the game ever asks you to go somewhere really far away, you open up the map and you're like, holy crap, I need to get to an island or I need to get somewhere. Most likely there's a portal that takes you there. You just have to figure out where it's located. And if you're Horde, there's lots of portals that will take you to OGRIMMAR. And if you're Alliance, there's lots of portals that will take you to your capital city of Stormwind. Now, speaking of bags, one of the things you can do in this game is you're going to start and you're going to have bag slots. So right now you can see we have different bag slots down here at the bottom, and I've emptied a couple of them for you guys to show you what it looks like. You'll see these empty circles, and what you can do is you can buy bags or craft bags, and you'll see that these both have 30 slots. It's not the highest that the game offers, but it's very close. So we'll put those on, and you can see our inventory is getting bigger. And this bag right here is a reagent bag. So you'll collect lots of reagents in this game, and you can just send them over to your reagent bag if you want. And your bag also has another nice function over here, clean up bags. You can click this and it'll sort your items for you and kind of put them into an order that makes sense. It'll put things that are potential gear upgrades. They tend to come up here in the top, or valuable things, you know, whereas trash and trinkets and things like that will get filtered down to the bottom. You can click this icon right here and you can tell the bag to automatically collect certain types of items. Bag 1, you can say this is for equipment, and bag 2 is for quest items, and bag 3 is for consumables, right? And so you can kind of help keep it organized that way yourself if you want. And you can get 4 extra slots simply by doing this here. You click that button, it says gain 4 extra backpack slots by securing your World of Warcraft account with Battle.net Authenticator and SMS Protect. So if you want 4 extra slots and you want account security, I'd recommend setting that up. I could swear I set this up already, so I'm surprised that it's asking me to do it again, but maybe I accidentally disconnected it. I'll set it up again right after this video. Now, what happens when you die in World of Warcraft? So let's go ahead and find out. I'm just gonna jump off of this ledge here. One thing that's gonna happen though is our gear is gonna take some durability loss. So we just lost 10% durability on our gear. We were at an average of 93% on the gear. Now we're at an average of 83% durability on our gear. We're going to see this option pop up, 6 minutes until release, or we can release now. Okay, so we release now, and we're going to be here at a graveyard. We'll respawn, and basically all we have to do is go back to the tombstone, wherever that might be. You can open up your map and find it if you'd like to. And here we can see it's right there. So just go ahead and fly to it. Now, depending on where you die, you may not spawn in on a mount like this. This is just because I'm in DRAGONFLIGHT. And there's a lot of places that you quite literally can't get to without being on a flying mount. So here we go. We accept the resurrection, and now here we are. We're back where we were. Got all our gear. The only thing that we lost really was some durability on the gear and the time it took us to run back to our corpse and accept the resurrection. There was one other choice that we could have had. We could have chosen, when we were at the graveyard, we had the option to resurrect there. If we accept the resurrect from the graveyard attendant back there, it's going to give us resurrection sickness, which lasts a long time and greatly debuffs your character. So you never want to accept that res unless you're super low level and it says there's not really a penalty for doing so, or if you know that you're okay with having a massive debuff on your character for a while. Otherwise, 99% of the time, it's going to be worth it to run back to your character and just get the res that way. Another thing to be aware of in this game is the enemy health bars. So up here, you can see enemy health bars are green. Those are friendly. And if we go down here, we can see some yellow enemy health bars. These are neutral. We can attack these if we want. You know, they're neither friend nor foe. They won't attack unless we attack them. And then if we go just a little bit farther, we should be able to find some red enemy health bars. Yeah, there you go. And so these will attack you if you get nearby, right? They're aggressive mobs, in other words. So you've got your red, they'll attack you if they see you. You've got yellow, who won't attack unless you attack. And then green, they're your friends. You won't be able to attack them. Another thing to be aware of with enemy health bars. So if we look at these guys, they have little dragons next to their health bars. If we look at their emblem here, they've got like a dragon wrapped around it. That means they're going to be significantly harder than a normal mob and potentially drop significantly better loot. So just be aware of the fact that when you see that symbol, it could mean trouble for you. You'll also notice there that it tells you what level they are when you click on them. So you know, hey, this is a fight I can win, or maybe not, right? You ever see a skull and crossbones, definitely turn around and head the other way. All right, the next thing I really want to quickly touch on is your Hearthstone. You're going to get one of these, and when you do, you'll be able to bind it to an inn. And that way, every time you use it, it's going to teleport you back to that inn. So the way you use this is generally, you get to a new quest hub, and you go to the inn at that quest hub, and you tell him, hey, I want to make this in my home. Say sure, and you say yes. And now whenever you use your Hearthstone, it's going to teleport you back to this inn. The item does have a cooldown, so just be aware of the fact that after you use it, you're going to have to wait a while before using it again. Next, let's quickly touch on quest markers. So you're going to see all sorts of different types of quest markers in the game. You got yellow exclamation points like this one, or gold, whatever color you want to call that. You've got the quest with the background like this, signifying that they are important to that zone's storyline. Then you've also got blue quests like this one here, which means it's a repeatable quest that you can do on a daily or weekly basis. So we complete this, there you go. And you'll notice that sometimes you see a question mark. That means it's a quest that's ready to turn in. So exclamation point is a quest to pick up. Question mark is a quest to turn in. So we'll go ahead and complete that. There we go. Just completed those 2 daily quests for today. Other symbols that are worth noting is if you see a pink exclamation point, that means it's important. If you see an exotic blue exclamation point like this one, it means it's meta. It's a time-gated quest that gives valuable endgame rewards. And if you see a ... it means that it's a quest that you're currently in progress on. Then there's limited time activities. So when you see these symbols on the map, it means that they're there temporarily, whether it's a world quest, a world boss, a bonus objective. These can give XP and varying amounts of rewards. Then you've got events, various patch-specific activities provide valuable rewards. And then you've got rare monsters that can spawn and rare elite monsters that can spawn. So furthermore, you've got these activities. If you see the blue swirly, it's a dungeon. You see a green swirly, it's a raid. So the dungeon you're going to want 5 people to go into, and with the raid you're going to probably want minimum of 10. Then you've got hubs, dig sites, pet battle locations, and the newly added delve system. Then you've got this symbol here wherever there's a teleport point or some kind of fast travel like a portal or a zeppelin. And then you've got cave entrances, and of course the boots are the flight points. Like we mentioned, the yellow boots are neutral, so either the Alliance or the Horde can use them. Red boots are Horde only, blue boots are Alliance only. Now let's quickly go over the WoW token. If you're someone that wants to play your MMO without paying $15 a month for a subscription, you can buy a WoW token for, well, currently 291,000 gold. So if you collect 291,000 gold that month, you can then buy a WoW token, and you can use that WoW token to pay for your next month's sub. And if you keep collecting at least 291,000 or whatever these are going for at that time, you can keep playing WoW without having to pay for the subscription with real cash. Alternatively, you could choose to be the whale that is buying the WoW token with $20 of cash and selling it to people for 291,000 gold. So if you ever need gold in game, you could buy it with cash money, but I highly recommend not doing this. One, because this is a horrible feature in any MMO that it exists in, and two, you're going to make plenty of money by playing this game. You're not going to need this kind of money. You're just deleting real world currency for no reason and converting it to fake in-game currency. All right, guys, I think that is absolutely everything that you could possibly need to know to get started in World of Warcraft. This is the most popular MMO in the world for a reason. It's massive. It's got lots of depth to it. That depth can lead to a very confusing start, you know, which is okay. Don't feel bad when you're inevitably confused when you first start the game. That's normal. Everybody is that way. Everybody feels overwhelmed when they're walking around these cities at first. Everyone feels lost, but very quickly that overwhelming feeling turns into excitement, turns into joy, and you'll start having a lot of fun. I promise you. If you made it this far, please let me know down in the comments below that you made it all the way to the end. I love hearing from you guys. Let me know what you thought of the video. Was it helpful? Did you wish there was some information that I didn't include? And I'll make sure to include it next time when I update this guide. Thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I couldn't do these guys without you guys. If you enjoyed the video, leave a comment, leave a like, or subscribe for more MMO guides. Massive shout out to my YouTube channel members who make these massive guides possible. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel in the big way that you do. If you want to become a YouTube channel member, click the join button down below or click the link in the description for perks like behind the scenes footage, a private Discord channel where you can ask me any questions about the game that you want, and more. If you're not sure what to do next, check out one of the videos popping up on screen right now, and I'll see you in the next one.